Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, watching the stars bend and twist through the viewing screen as the ship dropped out of quantum fold drive. The year was 2157, and this was humanity's first deep space exploration mission beyond their home solar system. Jake felt his heart racing with excitement as the ship's engines powered down, and the familiar starfield appeared before them. Navigation report, Jake called out to his crew. Pete Williams, the navigation officer, checked his instruments carefully. "We're in the Kepler 442 system, Captain, right where we planned to be. All systems are working perfectly." Jake nodded and looked around at his small but excellent crew. Dr. Lisa Carter, the chief science officer, was already running scans of the nearby planets. Amy Rodriguez sat at the communication station, monitoring all frequencies for any signs of intelligent life. Ben Taylor, the chief engineer, kept a close eye on the ship's systems to make sure everything was running smoothly. These 4 people represented the best of humanity. They had trained for years for this mission. Their job was simple: explore new star systems, map planets, and look for signs of life. What they found here would change everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. "Dr. Carter, what do you see out there?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up from her scanner with bright eyes. "This system has 7 planets, Captain. 3 of them are in the habitable zone where liquid water could exist. The 4th planet is particularly interesting. It's about the same size as Earth and has an atmosphere that could support life." Jake felt a surge of excitement. Finding a planet that could support life was every explorer's dream. "Any signs of life on the surface?" Lisa worked with her instruments, for several minutes running deeper scans. Suddenly her face changed. Her eyes went wide and she looked up at Jake with an expression of pure amazement. "Captain, you need to see this. I'm detecting artificial structures on the planet's surface, large ones, and there are energy signatures that suggest a developed civilization." The bridge went completely silent. Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. In all of human history, they had never found proof of intelligent alien life. Now, on their first deep space mission, they might have discovered an entire alien civilization. "Are you certain, Doctor?" Jake asked quietly. Lisa double-checked her readings. "I'm seeing cities, Captain. Real cities with organized layouts. There are signs of agriculture, transportation networks, and what looks like industrial activity. This is definitely an intelligent species." Amy Rodriguez spun around in her chair. "Captain, I'm not picking up any radio signals or electronic communications. Either they don't use that technology, or they're using something we don't understand." Ben Taylor looked worried. "Should we be concerned about our safety? We don't know if they're friendly or hostile." Jake thought carefully. Earth's first contact protocols were clear. When meeting an alien species for the first time, humans should approach peacefully but carefully. They should demonstrate their advanced technology to establish their superiority, then work to build friendly relations. "We're going to make contact," Jake decided. "But we'll be careful. Dr. Carter, what can you tell me about their technology level?" Lisa studied her scans more closely. "From what I can see, they appear to be in a Bronze Age level of development. Their cities are made of simple materials like stone and metal. I don't see any signs of advanced technology like electricity or powered flight. We should be much more advanced than they are." Jake felt confident. Humanity had spaceflight, quantum computers, energy weapons, and medical technology that could cure almost any disease. They would certainly seem like gods to a Bronze Age civilization. "All right, we're going down to the surface. Pete, find us a safe landing spot near one of their cities, but not too close. We don't want to frighten them." Pete worked with his navigation systems. "I've found a good spot about 5 miles from what looks like their largest city. It's a flat area with no signs of their people nearby." "Perfect. Everyone, prepare for first contact. This is the moment that will change human history forever." Discovery landed on the alien planet's surface with a soft thud. Through the ship's cameras, they could see a landscape that looked remarkably similar to Earth. There were blue skies, green plants, and in the distance, they could see the walls and buildings of an alien city. Jake put on his protective suit and prepared to step outside. The other crew members would stay on the ship for now. monitoring everything and ready to help if needed. Atmospheric analysis shows the air is breathable, Lisa reported, but keep your suit on just in case. Jake opened the ship's door and stepped onto the surface of an alien world. The ground felt solid under his feet. The air smelled clean and fresh through his suit's filters. In the distance, he could see movement near the city walls. Within an hour, a group of aliens approached the landing site. Jake's first look at an intelligent alien species took his breath away. They were tall, about 7 feet in height, with smooth blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Each of them had 4 arms instead of 2, and their faces were similar to humans but with larger eyes and no visible nose. What surprised Jake most was how calmly they approached. They didn't seem afraid or excited. They walked toward the ship, like they were going to meet neighbors, not visitors from another world. The lead alien stopped about 20 feet from Jake and spoke in perfect English. "Welcome to Zephyr. I am Council Leader Nex. We have been expecting you." Jake stood frozen in shock. Not only could the alien speak English, but he had said they were expecting them. How was that possible? "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Discovery," Jake managed to say. "How do you speak our language?" "Language is not difficult when you understand the basic patterns of communication," Nex replied calmly. "Your species uses a relatively simple system." Jake felt a bit insulted by the comment about their language being simple, but he pushed the feeling aside. "We come in peace from the planet Earth. We're explorers, seeking to make contact with other intelligent species." "Yes, we know about Earth," Nex said. "Please follow me. The Council would like to meet with you." As they walked toward the city, Jake tried to impress the aliens with stories about human technology. He told them about their spaceships, their computers, and their ability to travel between stars. Nex listened politely but didn't seem impressed. "That's very nice," Nex would say after each description, the way an adult might respond to a child, showing off a simple drawing. When they reached the city, Jake was surprised by what he saw. The buildings looked simple from the outside, made of smooth stone and metal, but they were perfectly constructed. The streets were clean and well organized. The people moved about their daily business with calm efficiency. Jake expected the aliens to gather around and stare at him in wonder. Instead, they glanced at him with mild curiosity and continued with their work. It was as if visitors from space were completely normal. "Your people don't seem very excited to meet someone from another world," Jake observed. Nex tilted his head slightly. "Should we be excited? Visitors from developing worlds are not uncommon." Jake felt confused and a bit offended. Developing worlds? Humanity had just achieved faster-than-light travel. They were clearly an advanced civilization. How could these Bronze Age aliens consider them developing? "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Jake said. "We're from a very advanced civilization. We have technology that can travel between stars." "Yes, we noticed your ship," Nex replied. "It's quite charming. Very much like the ships other young species build when they first leave their home systems." Jake's confidence began to waver. Something was very wrong here. These aliens were treating him like a child showing off a toy, not like a representative of an advanced starfaring civilization. But that was impossible. Looking around their simple city, Jake could see no signs of advanced technology anywhere. As the day continued, Jake grew more and more confused. Every time he tried to impress the Zephyrians with human achievements, they responded with polite but uninterested acknowledgement. It was as if they had seen it all before, many times. When Jake returned to his ship that evening, he was deeply troubled. His crew could see the confusion on his face. "How did it go, Captain?" Lisa asked. Jake sat down heavily in his chair. "I'm not sure. Something isn't right here. These aliens aren't reacting the way they should. They act like we're the primitive ones, not them." The crew exchanged worried glances. This first contact was not going at all the way they had expected. The next morning, Jake decided to try a different approach. If the Zephyrians weren't impressed by stories about human technology, maybe seeing it in action would change their minds. He gathered his crew and prepared a demonstration that would surely show these aliens how advanced humanity really was. "Today we're going to show them what we can do," Jake announced to his team. "Ben, Bring the portable fusion generator. Lisa, pack the medical scanner and the molecular analyzer. Amy, get the quantum communicator. We'll prove to them that we're not some primitive species. The crew loaded their most impressive equipment onto a transport cart and headed back to the Zephyrian city. Jake felt confident that once the aliens saw real human technology in action, they would understand who they were dealing with. Council leader Nex met them at the city gates with the same calm, polite manner as before. "Good morning, Captain Morrison. What brings you to visit us today?" "We thought you might be interested in seeing some of our technology," Jake said proudly. "We want to show you what human science can accomplish." "How thoughtful," Nex replied, in the same tone someone might use when a child offers to show them their finger painting. "Please proceed." Jake's first demonstration was the portable fusion generator. This device could produce enough clean energy to power a small city. It represented centuries of human scientific achievement. Jake activated the generator and watched as it hummed to life, its displays showing massive energy output. "This device creates energy by fusing atoms together," Jake explained. "It can produce more power than your entire city probably uses." Nex examined the device politely. "Very nice. Fusion is indeed a useful process for young civilizations." Jake waited for more reaction, but that was all. The other Zephyrians who had gathered to watch seemed mildly interested, like people watching someone demonstrate a slightly unusual kitchen appliance. Frustrated, Jake moved to the next demonstration. Lisa stepped forward with the medical scanner, a device that could analyze a person's entire body and detect any illness or injury in seconds. "This medical scanner can look inside a living body without cutting it open," Lisa explained. "It can detect diseases that haven't even shown symptoms yet." She demonstrated the scanner on Jake, and the device's screen showed a detailed three-dimensional image of his internal organs, blood flow, and nervous system. On Earth, this technology was considered miraculous. The Zephyrians watched with the same polite interest. "Medical scanning is certainly convenient," one of them commented. "Your species has made good progress in that area." Lisa felt her frustration growing. Good progress? This was cutting-edge technology that had taken humanity decades to develop. How could they act like it was just ordinary? Ben stepped forward with his demonstration. He had brought a sample of smart metal, a material that could change its shape and properties based on electrical signals. He activated the metal and watched as it transformed from a flat sheet into a complex tool, then into a small sculpture, then back into a flat sheet. "This material can become anything we need it to be," Ben explained. "It's programmable matter that responds to our commands." The Zephyrians watched the demonstration quietly. "Interesting approach," Nex said. "Shape-shifting. Materials are quite useful for species that haven't yet learned to manipulate matter directly." Jake felt his confidence cracking. What did that mean, manipulate matter directly? And why did everything they showed seem to get the same underwhelmed response? Amy tried the final demonstration. She activated the quantum communicator, a device that could send messages instantly across vast distances by using quantum entanglement. She sent a message to Earth and received a reply within seconds, despite being hundreds of light years away. "This communicator can send messages faster than light," Amy explained. "We just talk to our home planet instantly, even though we're incredibly far away." "Quantum communication is a natural step for developing species," Nex acknowledged. "Though, most civilizations move beyond the need for such devices fairly quickly." Jake couldn't hide his frustration anymore. "I don't understand. We're showing you technology that represents the best of human achievement, and you're acting like it's nothing special. How is that possible when you live in a Bronze Age civilization?" For the first time, Nex showed an expression other than polite interest. He looked genuinely confused. "Bronze Age? I'm not familiar with that term." "You build with stone and simple metals," Jake explained. "You don't have electricity or computers or any kind of advanced technology that we can see." Several Zephyrians made a sound that Jake realized was laughter. "Oh," Nex said, understanding dawning on his face. "You think our tools and buildings represent our technological level, don't they?" Lisa asked. Watch, Nex said simply. He pulled out what looked like a simple stone from his pocket. To Jake's amazement, the stone began to glow and change shape. Within seconds, it had transformed into a device that looked more advanced than anything on the Discovery. The device projected a three-dimensional image of the entire star system, complete with detailed information about every planet, moon, and asteroid. This is our equivalent of your quantum communicator, Nex explained. It can contact anyone in our civilization instantly anywhere in the galaxy. It can also analyze matter and energy at the subatomic level, manipulate local space-time, and perform what you would call medical scans on any life form within several light years. Jake stared at the device in shock. It looked like a simple stone, but it was clearly far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. But how? Ben asked. It looks so simple. Why would we make our tools look complicated? Nex asked. Complex appearance usually indicates primitive engineering. The most advanced tools are the ones that appear simplest because they have moved beyond the need for visible complexity. Amy found her voice. If you have technology like that, why do your buildings look so basic? Because they serve their purpose perfectly, Nex replied. These buildings are constructed from materials that exist partially in normal space and partially in folded dimensions. They are stronger than anything you could imagine, completely weatherproof, and they repair themselves if damaged. They also exist in harmony with the natural environment. Why would we make them look more complicated than necessary? Lisa felt her world turning upside down. How long has your species had this level of technology? We achieved what you might call advanced technology about 15,000 of your years ago, Nex said casually. Since then, we have focused on other pursuits. Other pursuits? Jake asked weakly. Art, philosophy, spiritual growth, the pursuit of wisdom and meaning. Once you have solved all the practical problems of existence, you begin to focus on the questions that really matter. Pete, who had been quiet until now, asked the question that was troubling them all. If you've had this technology for 15,000 years and you know about Earth, why haven't you contacted us before? Nex seemed to consider his words carefully before answering. Your species has been watched. Many civilizations go through the phase your people are currently experiencing. Most either grow beyond it or destroy themselves. We prefer to wait and see which path a species will choose before making formal contact. What phase are we in? Lisa asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The aggressive expansion phase, Nex replied. Your people have developed the ability to travel between stars, but you are still driven by the same competitive and territorial instincts that helped you survive on your home world. You explore with weapons, you think in terms of conquest and dominance, and you assume that more powerful technology makes you superior to other species. Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Are you saying we're primitive? Not primitive, Nex said gently. Young. Most species go through this phase. The question is whether they grow beyond it. And if they don't? Amy asked quietly. Nex was quiet for a long moment. Then they become a problem that the galactic community must address. The human crew stood in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about themselves, about their place in the universe, about their achievements and their future, was crumbling around them. How many other species are there like you? Ben asked. In this galaxy alone? Several. 1,000 civilizations have achieved what we call the convergence. Most prefer to live simply and focus on personal growth rather than technological expansion. And species like us? Lisa asked. There are currently 43 species in your phase of development. Most are being watched as you are. Jake felt overwhelmed. We thought we were alone in the universe. We thought we were special. You are special, Nex said kindly. Every species is unique. The question is not whether you are special, but whether you will choose wisdom or remain trapped by the instincts of your evolutionary past. As they walked back to their ship that evening, the human crew was quiet. The universe had become a much larger and more complex place than they had ever imagined, and humanity's place in it was far smaller and more uncertain than they had ever dreamed. What do we do now? Amy asked quietly. Jake looked up at the stars, which suddenly seemed very different than they had just 2 days ago. I think we need to learn a lot more about what we don't know. Ben Taylor couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about what the Zephyrians had shown them. As the ship's engineer, he had always been practical about solving problems. Now he had the biggest question of his life, and he needed a practical answer. The next morning, Ben approached Captain Morrison with his concern. "Jake, I need to ask them something. If they're so advanced, why are they living like farmers and artists? It doesn't make sense." Jake nodded. He had been wondering the same thing. "Let's go ask them. I think we need to understand what we're really dealing with here." The crew returned to the Zephyrian city, and Ben posed his question directly to Council Leader Nex. "If your people can do anything they want with technology, why do you live in simple buildings and spend your time on art and philosophy? Why aren't you building bigger cities or exploring more planets?" Nex smiled, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely pleased by one of their questions. "Now that is an intelligent question. Please sit with me and I will explain something that took our people many centuries to understand." They sat in a circle in what appeared to be a simple garden, but Jake noticed that the plants seemed to respond to their presence, shifting slightly to provide better shade and more comfortable seating. When a species first develops technology, Nex began, they use it to solve survival problems. Better tools, better weapons, better shelter. This is natural and necessary. As the technology improves, they solve bigger problems. Disease, hunger, transportation, communication. The humans nodded. This described humanity's development perfectly. Eventually, if the species doesn't destroy itself, they reach a point where technology can solve any physical problem they face. They can manipulate matter and energy at will. They can travel anywhere instantly. They can cure any disease, fix any injury, even prevent death from old age. Lisa leaned forward. "That sounds incredible, like becoming gods." "That's exactly what most species think," Nex agreed. "And that's where they face the great choice that determines their future." "What choice?" Jake asked. "Whether to continue pursuing power or to begin pursuing wisdom." Amy looked confused. "What's the difference?" Nex stood up and walked to a nearby tree. He placed his hand on its trunk and the tree began to change. Its branches rearranged themselves into beautiful patterns, its leaves shifted through different colors, and flowers bloomed along its length in designs more complex than anything found in nature. "I can reshape this tree any way I choose," Nex said. "I can make it grow into any form, produce any kind of fruit, live for any length of time. I have complete power over it." He removed his hand, and the tree slowly returned to its natural state. But the question becomes, what should I do with this power? Should I reshape every tree to suit my preferences? Should I redesign entire forests? Should I remake whole planets to be more convenient for my people? Ben saw where this was going. You could, but should you? Exactly. When you have unlimited power, the question is no longer what you can do, but what you should do. And that question can only be answered through wisdom, not technology. Pete asked, "So what did your people decide?" "We learned that the most important things in existence cannot be created through power. Love, beauty, meaning, inner peace, true friendship, spiritual growth. These things must be discovered and developed through experience, reflection, and choice." Nex gestured around the city. "So we chose to live simply. Our technology provides everything we need, but invisibly. Our buildings are perfectly comfortable and will last forever, but they look natural and peaceful. Our tools can do anything, but they are simple to use and don't distract us from what matters." Lisa struggled with this concept. "But what about progress? What about discovery and exploration?" "We explore constantly," Nex replied, "but we explore inward as much as outward. We explore the depths of consciousness, the nature of existence, the meaning of life itself. We discover new forms of art, new ways of understanding reality, new paths to wisdom and peace." "That sounds boring," Amy said honestly. Several Zephyrians nearby made their laughing sound. "Does it?" Nex asked. "Tell me, in your entire life, Have you ever experienced a moment of perfect peace? A time when you felt completely connected to everything around you? A moment when you understood something so deeply that it changed who you are? Amy thought about it. I guess so. A few times. Those moments are what we live for, Nex explained. When you no longer have to worry about survival or comfort or even death, you can focus on those experiences that give life true meaning. You can spend centuries exploring a single idea, developing relationships that grow deeper over thousands of years, creating art that captures truths you never knew existed. Jake felt overwhelmed. How many species have made this choice? In this galaxy, we know of about 3,000 species that have reached what we call the convergence. Each found their own path, but all chose wisdom over power. What about the species that chose differently? Ben asked. Nex's expression grew serious. Some species become so focused on gaining more power that they never learn when to stop. They consume everything around them, constantly expanding, always needing more resources, more territory, more control. What happens to them? Lisa asked, quietly. They become a threat to all peaceful life in the galaxy. When that happens, the convergent species act together to protect the galaxy. Pete felt a chill. What do you mean, act together? We prevent them from spreading beyond their home systems. We contain them until they either learn wisdom or exhaust themselves fighting against limitations they cannot overcome. Amy's voice was barely a whisper. How many species have been contained? 17. In the last 10,000 years. Most eventually destroyed themselves. A few learned wisdom and were welcomed into the galactic community. 2 are still contained, still fighting against boundaries they cannot see or understand. Jake felt sick. Are we being considered for containment? Nex looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Your species is being watched, very carefully. You have developed interstellar travel, but you still think like a territorial species. You explore with weapons. You assume that stronger technology makes you superior. You compete with each other, even when cooperation would serve you better. But we're not trying to conquer anyone, Ben protested. Not yet, Nex agreed. But your people's history shows a pattern. When you encounter something you want, you take it. When you meet someone weaker, you dominate them. When you find new territory, you claim it as your own. Lisa felt defensive. We've also shown we can be peaceful. We've learned to cooperate. Sometimes, Nex acknowledged, and that gives us hope. But your species is at a critical point. You must choose between the path of power and the path of wisdom, and you must choose soon. How soon? Jake asked. Your people have perhaps 50 of your years to demonstrate that you can move beyond your aggressive instincts. If you can show that you choose cooperation over domination, wisdom over conquest, growth over expansion, then you will be welcomed into the galactic community. And if we can't? Amy asked. Nex was quiet for a long moment. Then you will be quietly contained to your home system. You will be allowed to live and develop within that space, but you will not be permitted to spread your aggressive nature to other star systems. The human crew sat in stunned silence. Everything they had dreamed about, exploring the galaxy, meeting new species, expanding human civilization across the stars, could be taken away if humanity couldn't change its fundamental nature. Is it even possible? Pete asked. Can an entire species change what it is? Every convergent species had to make that choice, Nex replied. Some took centuries to complete the transition. Others managed it in just a few generations. It depends on how badly they want to change, and how willing they are to give up the attitudes that brought them to space in the first place. Ben asked. The practical question. What would we have to do? Stop thinking of yourselves as conquerors and start thinking of yourselves as gardeners. Stop trying to dominate your environment and start trying to understand your place in it. Stop competing with each other and start working together for the good of all life. Jake felt the weight of his entire species' future on his shoulders. How do we convince billions of people to change everything they believe about human nature? That, Nex said gently, is the test every species must pass to earn their place among the stars. As they walked back to their ship that evening, the crew was quieter than they had ever been. They were no longer explorers discovering a new world. They were students who had just learned that everything they thought they knew was wrong, and that their final exam would determine the fate of everyone they had ever loved. The stars above. Them seemed different now. Not empty space waiting to be claimed, but a vast community they might never be allowed to join. Amy Rodriguez spent the entire night working at her communication station. She couldn't stop thinking about what Nex had told them. If humanity was really being tested, she needed to know more about what that test looked like. She had always been good with computers and communication systems, and she wondered if she could learn more from the Zephyrian information networks. The next morning, she approached Jake with her request. "Captain, I want to try something. The Zephyrians mentioned they have information networks. Maybe I can learn to access them and find out more about this test we're supposedly taking." Jake looked tired. None of them had slept well. "Do you think they'll let you?" "Only one way to find out," Amy replied. When they returned to the city, Amy asked Nex if she could study their communication systems. To her surprise, he agreed immediately. "Of course," Nex said. "Learning is always welcome, but I should warn you, you may not like everything you discover." Nex led Amy to what looked like a simple stone platform in the center of the city. When she stepped onto it, the platform began to glow softly, and suddenly Amy's mind was filled with information. It was like being connected to the internet, but instead of just data, she could sense thoughts, feelings, and knowledge from across the galaxy. The first thing Amy discovered made her stomach turn. Humanity wasn't just being watched by the Zephyrians. There was an entire galactic network dedicated to monitoring species like humans. She could access files about dozens of other civilizations that were going through the same test humanity was facing. "Oh no," Amy whispered as she read through the records. Jake noticed her distress. "What is it? What did you find?" Amy's voice shook as she spoke. "Jake, this test isn't theoretical. It's real, and it's happening right now. There are detailed records about every species that's been evaluated." She showed them what she had learned. The galactic community didn't just watch developing species casually. They had specific criteria for determining which species were becoming threats. The test was based on how a species behaved after achieving interstellar travel. "What are the criteria?" Lisa asked nervously. Amy read from the information flowing through her mind. "First, do they explore with weapons as their primary tools? Second, do they try to claim territory that doesn't belong to them? Third, do they assume they have the right to take resources from other worlds? Fourth, do they treat other species as inferior? And fifth, do they continue fighting among themselves even after reaching the stars?" Pete felt sick. How does humanity score on those criteria? Amy was quiet for a moment, accessing more information. "Not good. We sent out our first interstellar mission with enough weapons to fight a small war. Our governments are already making plans to claim entire star systems for human colonies. We're strip mining our own planet and looking for more resources to exploit. And we definitely assumed we were superior to any aliens we might meet." "What about fighting among ourselves?" Ben asked. "There are currently 18 active wars happening on Earth," Amy said quietly. Jake sat down heavily. "So we're failing the test." "It gets worse," Amy continued. "I can see the records of species that failed this test completely. There's something called the Korthax Dominion. They were a lot like humans, aggressive, territorial, convinced they were destined to rule the galaxy." "What happened to them?" Lisa asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Amy accessed their records. They achieved interstellar travel about 800 years ago. Within 50 years, they had colonized 12 star systems and were preparing to conquer their neighbors. That's when the convergent species acted. "How did they stop them?" Pete asked. Amy read through the technical details, trying to understand them. They created what they call a containment field around the entire Korthax territory. It's like an invisible wall that Korthax ships cannot cross. From the inside, space looks completely normal, But any ship that tries to leave Korthak space just ends up back where it started. That's impossible, Ben said. You can't just wall off entire star systems. Nex, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. When you can manipulate space and time at will, very little is impossible. The containment field exists in folded dimensions. The Korthaks cannot detect it, cannot understand it, and cannot break through it. Amy continued reading the Korthaks' records. They spent 200 years trying to break out. They built bigger weapons, stronger ships, more advanced technology. Nothing worked. Eventually, they turned their aggression inward and started fighting civil wars. Their population dropped from billions to millions. Are they still alive? Jake asked. Yes, but barely. They live on 3 planets now instead of 12 star systems. They've given up trying to expand and mostly focus on survival. Lisa felt horrified. That could be humanity's future? There's another case that's even worse, Amy said, accessing more records. The Vazek Empire. They were contained about 3,000 years ago, but they never stopped trying to break out. They became so obsessed with escaping their containment that they turned their entire civilization into a war machine. What happened to them? Ben asked. They're still contained, and they're still fighting, but they're not fighting the containment anymore. They're fighting each other. They've been in constant civil war for over 1,000 years. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but they only use it to hurt each other. Pete couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why don't the convergent species just stop them? Nex answered sadly. Every species has the right to choose its own path, even if that path leads to self-destruction. We prevent them from harming others, but we cannot force them to find wisdom. Amy found more records, and these were even more disturbing. There's a species called the Rentak that was contained 500 years ago. They tried a different approach. Instead of fighting the containment, they tried to prove they had changed. They sent peaceful messages, destroyed their weapons, and claimed they had learned wisdom. Did it work? Jake asked hopefully. No, Amy said. The convergent species have ways of reading the true nature of a civilization. The Rentak had only changed on the surface. Deep down, they were still planning conquest. They thought they could fool the convergent species into letting them out. So what happened? Their containment was made permanent. Before that, contained species always had the possibility of earning their freedom if they truly changed. The Rentak lost that chance forever. The human crew sat in stunned silence as the full weight of their situation became clear. Humanity wasn't just being tested. They were being evaluated by being so advanced that lying or pretending to change was impossible. How many species have actually passed this test? Lisa asked. Amy searched through the records. In the last 1,000 years, 17 species reached the point where they were being evaluated. 3 passed the test and joined the galactic community. 2 are still being watched and might succeed. 12 have been contained, and most of those have either destroyed themselves or are heading toward self-destruction. Those aren't good odds, Pete said. Jake asked the question they were all thinking. Amy, can you find any information about what the species that passed the test did differently? Amy spent several minutes searching through the successful cases. The pattern is interesting. All 3 species that passed had the same thing happen. They experienced what the records call the awakening moment. What's that? Ben asked. It's when a species realizes that their aggressive instincts are not strengths but weaknesses, not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. They don't just understand that they need to change. They actually want to change, even if it means giving up everything they thought made them special. How did that happen for them? Jake asked. Amy read through the detailed records. For the Alari, it happened when they encountered a peaceful species that was clearly superior to them in every way. The experience humbled them so completely that they spent the next century focused on becoming worthy of friendship with advanced beings. What about the others? Lisa asked. The Morvac had a different experience. They discovered that their home planet was dying because of their aggressive exploitation of resources. Instead of looking for another planet to exploit, they completely changed their relationship with their environment. They learned to live in harmony with natural systems. And the third species? The Yethak were attacked by another aggressive species and almost wiped out. But instead of becoming more aggressive in response, they chose to become more peaceful. They decided that the cycle of violence had to end with them, even if it meant they might be destroyed. Jake felt overwhelmed. So all three species had to give up their fundamental nature? More than that, Amy said. They had to want to give it up. They had to choose wisdom over power, cooperation over domination, harmony over conquest. And they had to make that choice as an entire species. Nex had been listening to their conversation with growing sadness. Now you understand why so few species pass this test. It's not enough to be smart or advanced, you have to be wise. And wisdom often requires giving up the very things that helped you survive long enough to reach the stars. As they prepared to return to their ship, Amy made one final discovery in the galactic records. There was a file about Earth, and it had been updated very recently. There's a file about us, she told T. The crew of the Discovery spent their final day with the Zephyrians asking questions they weren't sure they wanted answers to. Jake knew they would have to return to Earth soon, but he needed to understand exactly what humanity was facing. Nex, Jake said as they sat together in the peaceful garden, I need to know something. The species that succeeded in passing this test, what exactly did they do? How did they convince an entire civilization to change? Nex considered the question carefully. Each species found their own path, but there were common elements. They all had to face a moment of complete honesty about what they really were. Lisa leaned forward. What do you mean? Most aggressive species tell themselves stories about why their nature is good, Nex explained. They say they explore to spread knowledge, or they fight to protect the innocent, or they compete to improve themselves. These stories hide the truth about their real motivations. What truth? Pete asked. That they take because they want things. They fight because they enjoy winning. They compete because they fear being weak. They explore because they want to control new territory. Ben felt uncomfortable. Those motivations don't sound completely evil. They're not evil, Nex agreed. They're natural survival instincts, but they become dangerous when a species gains the power to travel between stars while still being driven by those instincts. Amy had been quiet, but now she spoke up. The species that succeeded, they admitted their real motivations? More than that, they experienced deep shame about what they had become. Not guilt about specific actions, but shame about their fundamental nature. They looked at themselves honestly and decided they didn't like what they saw. Jake struggled with this concept. How do you get billions of people to feel ashamed of human nature? You show them a better way to be, Nex replied. The Alari learned humility when they met species that were clearly superior, but chose to be kind instead of dominant. The Morvac learned respect for life when they saw how their aggression was destroying their own world. The Yethak learned compassion when they chose to break the cycle of violence even at great cost to themselves. But how do we do that for Earth? Lisa asked. We can't bring everyone here to meet you. Nex was quiet for a long moment. That is the challenge every successful species has faced. How do you help your people experience the awakening moment that will change everything they believe about themselves? The conversation continued through the day, and gradually the crew began to understand the full scope of what they were facing. It wasn't enough to convince Earth's governments to be more peaceful. It wasn't enough to share technology or make treaties. Humanity needed to fundamentally change its relationship with power, competition, and control. As evening approached, Nex presented them with a choice that none of them had expected. Before you return to your homeworld, he said, I must offer you an alternative path. What do you mean? Jake asked. You could choose to remain here. You could begin your own journey toward the convergence. Your species might fail their test, but you as individuals could join the galactic community. The crew exchanged glances. It was a tempting offer. They could escape the uncertainty of Earth's future and join a peaceful advanced civilization. What would happen to us if we stayed? Amy asked. You would live here as students and eventually as citizens of the galactic community. You would learn to move beyond your aggressive instincts. You would discover forms of fulfillment and meaning that your species has never imagined. You would live longer than any human in history and experience wonders beyond your current understanding. And Earth? Pete asked. Earth would face its test without your guidance. Other humans would eventually make contact with galactic civilization, but it might be too late for them to learn what they need to know. Jake felt the weight of the decision. Stay and save themselves, or return and try to save their entire species. How long do we have to decide? He asked. You must choose now, before you leave this world. Once you return to Earth with this knowledge, you cannot come back until your species either passes or fails their evaluation. Ben was the first to speak. I can't abandon my family, my wife, my children. They're on Earth. Whatever happens to humanity, I want to be with them. Amy nodded. My parents are still alive. My sister just had a baby. I can't run away and leave them to face this alone. Pete looked around at the peaceful Zephyrian city. This place is beautiful, and I'm tempted. But if there's even a small chance we can help Earth change, I think we have to try. Lisa was torn. As a scientist, the opportunity to learn from advanced civilizations was everything she had ever dreamed of. But as a human being, she couldn't abandon her species in their darkest hour. I want to stay, she admitted. But I think I need to go back. All eyes turned to Jake. As captain, he felt the weight of leadership more than ever. Nex, he said finally, if we stay, will it help humanity at all? No, Nex replied honestly. Your presence here would make no difference to Earth's evaluation. And if we go back, what are the chances we can actually help our species change? Very small, Nex admitted. Most humans will not want to hear what you have learned. They will reject the idea that their nature needs to change. Some will become angry at the suggestion that they are not as advanced as they believed. Jake looked at his crew. These were good people who had volunteered for a dangerous mission to advance human knowledge. Now they were being asked to return, home with news that might destroy everything their species believed about itself. We're going back, Jake decided. All of us. Together. Nex smiled sadly. I expected that choice. It shows both the best and worst aspects of your species. Your loyalty to each other is admirable, but your refusal to accept a wise offer because of emotional attachment is exactly the kind of thinking that makes change difficult. Maybe, Jake said, but we're human. For better or worse, that's what we are. Indeed, Nex agreed. That is exactly what you are. As they prepared to leave, Nex gave them one final piece of information. There is something you should know about the awakening moment, he said. It cannot be forced or faked. It must come from genuine realization and genuine desire to change. But it can be inspired by the right circumstances. What kind of circumstances? Lisa asked. Usually it happens when a species faces a crisis that their old ways of thinking cannot solve. Sometimes it's meeting a clearly superior but peaceful species. Sometimes it's an environmental disaster they cause themselves. Sometimes it's an outside threat that can only be defeated through cooperation instead of competition. Amy understood. You're saying humanity needs to experience something that will humble us enough to want to change. Change is possible, Nex said, but it must be chosen freely. And it must be chosen by enough of your population to shift your entire civilization's direction. Jake asked the final question that had been haunting him. Nex, do you think we have any chance of succeeding? Nex looked at each of them in turn. You have something that gives me hope. When faced with the choice between personal safety and loyalty to your species, you chose loyalty. When offered paradise for yourselves, you chose to share the burden of your people. That suggests your species might be capable of the kind of selflessness that true wisdom requires. But Jake sensed there was more. But you also chose emotion over logic and attachment over wisdom. Those same qualities that make you loyal also make you stubborn, territorial, and resistant to change. As they walked back to their ship for the last time, the crew was quiet. They were returning to Earth with the heaviest burden any humans had ever carried. They knew their species was facing an ultimate test, with very little chance of success. They knew that failure meant containment and eventual self-destruction, but they also knew that someone had to try. Jake stood at the ship's door and looked back at the Zephyrian city one last time. "Thank you," he called to Nex, "for everything." "The thanks should come from your species," Nex replied, "if you succeed in helping them change." As the Discovery lifted off from the alien world, Jake began composing his report to Earth Command in his mind. How do you tell an entire species that everything they believe about themselves is wrong? How do you convince billions of people to give up the very qualities they think make them special? "What are we going to call this report?" Amy asked. Jake looked out at the stars, which no longer seemed like territory waiting to be claimed, but like a vast community that humanity might never be allowed to join. "We thought wrong," he said simply. The ship turned toward Earth, carrying 5 humans who had learned that their species' greatest adventure was not exploring the galaxy, but discovering whether they had the wisdom to deserve it. The hardest part of their mission was just beginning.